I first noticed her outside the diner, standing in the rain. It was one of those late October nights where the air clings to you like a second skin, cold, damp, and heavy. My friends and I had just finished stuffing our faces with greasy burgers and fries, laughing at dumb inside jokes and planning our Halloween weekend. It was supposed to be a good night, but then I saw her. She was leaning against the streetlight across the parking lot, half hidden in the shadow. Her hoodie was soaked, clinging to her frame, and her hair hung in dark, wet strands around her face. For a second, I wasn't even sure it was her. But then she shifted, and the light caught her face. It was Jamie. We hadn't spoken in over 3 months. Not since that breakup that left both of us raw and bitter. To say it was messy would be putting it lightly. She cried, I yelled, and eventually we both stopped talking. I thought we'd agreed to go our separate ways. She'd even blocked me on Instagram, so it was pretty clear we were done. At least that's what I thought. But now there she was, staring at me. She didn't wave, didn't call out, just stood there, unmoving, in the rain. My stomach twisted. What's up? Brandon asked, smacking my arm to get my attention. Nothing, I said, forcing a shrug. Thought I saw someone I knew. Creepy, he joked, tossing his leftover fries at a stray cat before sliding into the driver's seat. Get in before you freeze to death, man. I climbed into the car, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping over me. As we pulled out of the lot, I glanced back, half hoping she'd be gone. She wasn't. Jamie was still there, standing under the streetlight, her face turned toward the car like she was watching me leave. By the time I got home, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. Maybe she just happened to be there. Maybe she hadn't even seen me. But when I lay down in bed that night, I couldn't get the image out of my head. The way she didn't move, didn't blink, just watched. I told myself I was overthinking it. But deep down, I knew something about it wasn't right. The next morning, I woke up to a notification pinging on my phone. Groggy and still half asleep, I reached for it, expecting some dumb group chat message from Brandon or Kayla. Instead, it was from an unknown number. Hey Ryan, did you see me last night? I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen as I stared at the message, my stomach sinking. No name, but I didn't need one. It had to be Jamie. I locked my phone and tossed it onto the bed like it was on fire. A part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't seen it, but curiosity gnawed at me. After all, she hadn't contacted me since the breakup, and out of nowhere, she's texting me? Eventually, I caved and unlocked my phone. My fingers hesitated over the keyboard before I typed. What do you want? The reply came almost instantly, like she'd been waiting for me to respond. Just wanted to say hi. You looked good last night. My heart raced. I hadn't been paranoid. She had seen me at the diner. My head started spinning with questions. Why had she been there? Why didn't she come over to talk? Why now? Before I could respond, another message came through. You should really lock your bedroom window. I shot up, my pulse thundering in my ears. My head whipped toward the window, the one right next to my desk. The blinds were open, and the faint morning light streamed in. I bolted over and yanked them shut, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. No way. There was no way she'd been watching me. She had to be messing with me, trying to freak me out. Jamie always had a knack for getting under my skin, but this was next level. I didn't reply. Instead, I blocked the number and tried to shake off the anxiety clawing at my chest. I went through my day pretending everything was normal, but I couldn't stop thinking about her. Every time I passed a window or turned a corner, I felt like someone was there, just out of sight. By the time the sun set, I was exhausted. The tension had drained me, and I felt ridiculous for letting her get in my head. I told myself it was over. She couldn't text me anymore, and she wouldn't come around again. But that night, as I lay in bed, I heard a soft tap on the window. The sound woke me up just after midnight. A faint but deliberate knock against the glass. My room was dark except for the faint glow of my phone charging on the nightstand. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I told myself it was nothing, maybe a tree branch swaying in the wind or some animal outside. But the longer I lay there, straining my ears, the harder it was to ignore the growing sense of dread. Then it came again, another knock. This time slower, more deliberate. I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest. The window was directly across from my bed, but I couldn't see anything beyond the blinds. The room felt suffocatingly still, and for a moment, I thought about just ignoring it, pulling the blanket over my head like a little kid. But what if it wasn't her? What if it was something else? Someone else? I grabbed my phone, using the dim screen light to guide me as I swung my legs over the side of the bed. Slowly, I approached the window, trying to keep my breathing steady. My fingers hovered over the blinds, hesitating. "Who's there?" I whispered. No answer. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and with one quick motion, I yanked the blinds open. There was nothing, just the empty backyard, illuminated by the faint orange glow of the streetlight filtering through the trees. I let out a shaky breath, laughing nervously at myself. Of course, no one was there. I was being ridiculous, letting her messages mess with my head. But then my phone buzzed in my hand, nearly making me drop it. A new text from another unknown number. "Why didn't you open it?" My blood ran cold. I stepped back from the window, scanning the yard again, but it was still empty. My fingers trembled as I typed back. "Where are you?" A reply came seconds later. "Closer than you think." I didn't sleep that night. I locked the window, double-checked the front and back doors, and sat in the living room with a kitchen knife by my side until the first light of morning crept in. Every creak of the house and every gust of wind had me on edge. By sunrise, I told myself I was done. I wasn't going to let Jamie scare me anymore. But deep down, I knew she wasn't going to stop. The next day, I couldn't focus on anything. My teachers' voices blurred into meaningless noise, and my friends kept asking if I was okay. I lied and said I was just tired. How was I supposed to explain that my ex-girlfriend, someone they all knew and liked, was stalking me? At lunch, I kept catching myself glancing over my shoulder, scanning the crowded cafeteria for any sign of her. She wasn't there. At least I didn't think she was. By the time school let out, I was practically running to get home. My plan was simple. Go straight to my room, lock the doors, and figure out what to do next. Maybe I'd call my parents. They were out of town for a few days, or go to the police even though I had no real evidence. Just text. I was halfway up the stairs when I felt it. That heavy, crawling sensation of being watched. I stopped and turned around, my eyes scanning the empty living room below. The curtains were closed, and the only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. But I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was there. "Hello," I called out, my voice shaky. No response. I swallowed hard and forced myself to keep moving. By the time I got to my room, I was sweating, my nerves wound so tight it felt like I was going to snap. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to catch my breath. That's when I noticed something wasn't right. The air in my room felt off, colder than usual. And then I saw it. My desk chair, the one I always kept tucked neatly under the desk, was turned out, as if someone had been sitting there. My chest tightened, and I instinctively backed up against the door. I scanned the room, my eyes darting to the window. It was still locked, the blinds still drawn, exactly how I'd left it. But the feeling of wrongness only grew. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. I pulled it out with trembling hands. "Do you feel it? That we're still connected?" The message hit me like a punch to the gut. How was she getting in? Was she already in the house? I wanted to scream, to run, but I couldn't move. My brain was stuck on one thought. I wasn't alone. Then, from somewhere deep in the house, I heard a faint creak. A floorboard. My blood turned to ice. The sound wasn't loud, but in the silence of the house, it felt deafening. I stood frozen by the door, straining to hear more. My breathing was shallow, my pulse hammering in my ears. Another creak came, closer this time, Someone was in the house. I glanced at my desk, my eyes landing on the baseball bat leaning against the side. I grabbed it, gripping the handle so tightly my knuckles turned white. My hands were shaking, but I told myself I had to move. I had to figure out what was happening. I unlocked my door as quietly as I could and peeked into the hallway. It was empty, stretching out in both directions. The house felt unnaturally still, like it was holding its breath. "Jamie?" I called, my voice barely above a whisper. "If this is some kind of joke, it's not funny." Silence. I stepped into the hallway, gripping the bat like my life depended on it. The floor creaked under my weight, and the sound made my heart jump. I turned toward the staircase, my eyes scanning the shadows. Nothing. I moved toward the living room, each step feeling like it took an eternity. The curtains were still drawn, and everything looked normal. But that feeling, that horrible sense of being watched, only grew stronger. "Jamie," I said louder this time, "if you're here, just come out." For a moment, I thought I heard a faint laugh, a soft, breathy sound that came from somewhere behind me. I whipped around, my heart racing, but the hallway was empty. I backed into the living room, my mind spinning. The door was locked. The windows were locked. There was no way she could have gotten in, unless she'd been here the whole time. I glanced at the stairs again, my stomach twisting. My parents' room, the attic. I didn't want to go up there, but I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling that she might be hiding somewhere. Taking a deep breath, I started up the stairs. The house was so quiet that every step felt like thunder. When I reached the landing, I froze. The door to the attic was ajar. It was always closed. Always. I stared at the dark gap, bile rising in my throat. I gripped the bat tighter, forcing myself to move toward it, my legs feeling like lead. When I reached the door, I pushed it open with the bat, my heart pounding so loudly I thought it might burst. The attic was pitch black, the faint smell of dust and wood filling the air. I reached for the pull cord to turn on the light, but before I could grab it, something moved in the darkness. I froze, my breath catching. A shadow shifted, just out of reach of the faint light from the hallway. "Jamie?" I whispered, my voice trembling. The shadow moved closer, and for the first time, I saw her face. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and her lips curled into a smile that didn't reach them. "I missed you," she said softly, her voice carrying that same edge it always had when she was angry. I stumbled back, my grip on the bat slipping. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, my voice cracking. Her smile widened, but she didn't answer. I stumbled back into the hallway, my bat slipping to the floor with a dull thud. Jamie stepped out of the shadows, her movements slow and deliberate, like she had all the time in the world. Her smile stayed fixed, unnerving and unnatural. "How did you get in here?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What do you want?" She tilted her head, her wet hair clinging to her face. That's when I noticed the hoodie she was wearing. It was mine, one I thought I'd lost months ago. Seeing her in it made my stomach churn. "I told you," she said softly. "I missed you." Her voice was calm, almost gentle, but her eyes were sharp, locked onto me like a predator sizing up its prey. "This isn't normal, Jamie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "You need help. You can't just break into people's houses." Her smile faltered for the briefest second, and something darker flickered in her expression. "You don't understand, do you?" she said, taking a step closer. "I didn't break in. I've been here, Ryan, watching you, making sure you're okay, making sure you don't forget about me." I backed up until my shoulders hit the wall. My mouth went dry. "You've been what?" I managed to choke out. Her smile returned, wider this time, and she reached into the pocket of her hoodie, pulling out a small, folded piece of paper. She held it out to me. "Read it," she said, her tone almost playful. I didn't move. "Jamie, I'm serious. Get out of my house before I read it. Her voice snapped, cold and sharp, and it froze me in place. My shaking hand reached out and took the paper. I unfolded it, my eyes scanning the words scrawled in her familiar handwriting. It wasn't a letter. It was a list. My name was written at the top, underlined twice. Below it were random details, times, places, things I'd done over the past few weeks. Monday, 3:15 p.m. Ryan at the diner with friends. Tuesday, 7:45 p.m. Ryan at home, window light off by 9:30. Friday, 4:20 p.m. Ryan at the park, alone. The list went on, each line more invasive than the last. My blood ran cold as I realized she'd been following me for weeks. Maybe longer. What the hell is this? I demanded, my voice rising. You've been spying on me? Jamie's smile twisted, her expression darkening. I had to, she said, her voice cracking. You don't know what it's like, Ryan. You don't know what you did to me when you left. I had to make sure you were okay, even if it meant this. This isn't okay, I shouted, clutching the paper like it might explain the insanity unfolding in front of me. You're sick, Jamie. You need to leave. Her smile disappeared completely, and she stared at me, her eyes wide and glistening. I can't leave, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. You don't get it. I won't let you throw me away again. Before I could respond, she lunged forward. She moved fast, faster than I expected. I barely had time to react as Jamie closed the distance between us, her hands grabbing for my arm. Her nails dug into my skin, sharp and relentless, and I yelped in pain, instinctively twisting away. The bat was still on the floor behind her, out of reach. My heart pounded as I fought to free myself, her grip like a vice. There was no reasoning with her now. Her face was a mask of raw desperation, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she pushed me back toward the wall. I shoved her, harder than I thought I could, and she stumbled, hitting the edge of the doorframe. It gave me just enough time to duck under her arm and bolt down the stairs. My legs felt shaky, unsteady, but adrenaline drove me forward. I reached the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife from the block on the counter. My hand trembled as I turned back toward the stairs, listening. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. She was coming down. My chest heaved as I backed away, the knife raised in front of me. Her shadow stretched down the staircase, and then she appeared, calm and composed, as if the struggle upstairs hadn't even fazed her. Her eyes locked on the knife, and she stopped at the base of the stairs, tilting her head slightly. The tension in the air was suffocating. For a moment, neither of us moved. My mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. My phone was upstairs, out of reach, and the front door felt impossibly far away. She took a step forward. Don't, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Jamie didn't stop. She moved slowly, her gaze fixed on me with an eerie intensity. My grip on the knife tightened, sweat slicking my palms. When she was only a few feet away, she paused. Her lips parted like she wanted to speak, but instead, she lunged. Instinct took over and I swung the knife. It wasn't a clean strike, more of a desperate swipe, but it connected. She let out a sharp cry and stumbled back, clutching her arm. I didn't wait to see how bad the cut was. I bolted past her, my shoulder colliding with hers as I made a break for the door. The cold night air hit me like a slap, but I didn't stop. I sprinted down the driveway, glancing back only once to see Jamie standing in the doorway, clutching her arm, her silhouette framed by the dim light from inside. Her voice followed me into the night, soft but chilling. This isn't over, Ryan. I didn't stop running until I reached the corner gas station a few blocks from my house. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, buzzing faintly as I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. My legs ached, my lungs burned, and the weight of what had just happened finally started to sink in. She had been in my house, watching me, waiting. And even after I fought her off, she didn't seem scared or regretful. She was angry. I stumbled inside, past the bored cashier scrolling on his phone, and went straight to the bathroom. Locking the door behind me, I leaned against the sink and stared at my reflection. My face was pale, my eyes wide and bloodshot. There was a faint scratch on my arm where she'd grabbed me, and I could still feel the phantom pressure of her grip. My hands shook as I splashed water on my face, trying to calm down. But no amount of cold water could drown out the image of her standing in the doorway, her voice echoing in my head. "This isn't over." I pulled out my phone, realizing it was still in my pocket. My first thought was to call the police, but then doubt crept in. What would I even tell them? That my ex-girlfriend had broken into my house and attacked me? That she'd been stalking me for weeks? The knife, the blood, maybe that was enough. But what if she was gone by the time they got there? What if they didn't believe me? My phone buzzed in my hand, and I nearly dropped it. Another message, from another unknown number. "You shouldn't have run." My breath caught in my throat. She knew where I was, or at least she was trying to make me think she did. My head snapped toward the bathroom door, my heart racing. I typed back, my fingers trembling, "Leave me alone. I'm calling the police." Seconds later, the reply came, "You won't. You never could handle things on your own." I locked the phone and stuffed it in my pocket, forcing myself to breathe. She was trying to get inside my head, trying to keep me scared and frozen. Couldn't let her win. Pushing open the bathroom door, I walked back to the counter, the knife wound on her arm still fresh in my memory. "Hey!" I said to the cashier, my voice unsteady. "Can I borrow your phone?" The guy looked up, clearly annoyed. "Why?" "Please. I need to call the police." Something in my tone must have convinced him, because he handed it over without another word. I dialed 911 with shaky hands, glancing out the window toward the darkened street. As the line rang, I thought I saw something move in the shadows beyond the gas station. I kept my eyes locked on the window, watching the shadows for any sign of movement, as the dispatcher's calm voice came through the phone. 911, what's your emergency?" My mouth felt dry, and I stumbled over my words at first. "Someone broke into my house," I said finally. "She attacked me. I think she's still following me." The dispatcher's tone shifted, more focused now. "Are you in a safe location?" "I think so. I'm at the Shell station on Main Street." "She's not here, but—" I trailed off, glancing at the street again. My paranoia was eating at me, every shadow and passing car making my heart race. "Officers are on their way," the dispatcher assured me. "Stay where you are and keep the doors locked if you can." "Can you describe the person who attacked you?" I hesitated, the weight of the situation hitting me all over again. "She's about my age. Long dark hair. Wearing a hoodie. It's black or dark gray. Her name is Jamie." There was a pause, the faint sound of typing on the other end. "You said she's your ex-girlfriend?" "Yes." "Okay, stay on the line with me. Help is coming." The dispatcher's voice was calm, but I couldn't relax. I kept watching the window, half expecting Jamie to appear out of nowhere. Every second stretched on forever, and I couldn't stop replaying her face in my head. Those wide, unblinking eyes and that twisted smile. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, 2 squad cars pulled into the parking lot. The flashing lights painted the gas station in jolting bursts of red and blue, and I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The officers approached cautiously, their hands on their holsters. I stepped outside, still clutching the cashier's phone. "Are you the one who called?" one of them asked. "Yeah," I said, my voice shaky. She's been stalking me. She was in my house tonight." I explained everything, the messages, the fight, the list I'd found in her pocket. They listened carefully, asking questions, their expressions growing more serious as I spoke. "Do you know where she might have gone?" one of them asked. "No," I admitted. I think she might still be around here." The officers exchanged a look before one of them nodded. "We'll check the area and head to your house. You should come with us, just to be safe." The thought of going back to the house made my skin crawl, but I agreed. As they walked me to the squad car, I glanced back at the shadows one last time. For a moment, I thought I saw her, standing just beyond the edge of the gas station's light, her face half hidden by the darkness. But when I blinked, she was gone. The ride back to my house was tense, the squad car filled with quiet radio chatter and the low hum of the engine. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window as we pulled onto my street. Everything looked the same, but it felt different now, tainted. My house wasn't a place of safety anymore. It was a trap she'd set for me. When we arrived, the officers swept the house while I waited outside. The minutes dragged on, each one stretching my nerves tighter. Finally, one of them returned, shaking his head. "She's not here," he said. "No signs of forced entry either." "You sure she was inside?" "I'm sure," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "She was in the attic. She was wearing my hoodie. I stopped myself, realizing how insane it sounded. The officer nodded, trying to keep his face neutral. "We'll file a report and keep an eye on the area. If she comes back, call us immediately." I wanted to scream, to make them understand how real the threat was. But instead, I nodded numbly and stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet, every corner and shadow feeling alive with menace. I locked every door and window, triple-checking each one before heading to my room. The attic door was shut now, but I couldn't bring myself to look at it for long. I just wanted the night to be over. Collapsing onto my bed, I stared at the ceiling, too wired to sleep, but too drained to do anything else. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the screen lighting up the dark room. Another unknown number. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. "Miss me yet?" My blood ran cold. I bolted upright, staring at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. My heart pounded as another message came through. "Look outside." I didn't want to. Every fiber of my being screamed at me not to, but I couldn't stop myself. I stood slowly, my legs trembling as I crossed the room and peeled back the edge of the blinds. First, I didn't see anything. The street was empty, the houses dark and quiet. But then my eyes caught movement. She was standing under the streetlight, her hoodie gone now, replaced by a plain white shirt. Her arm was bandaged where I'd cut her, but she didn't seem bothered. She just stood there, staring up at my window, that same unsettling smile plastered across her face. For a moment we locked eyes. She raised her hand and waved, slow and deliberate, before turning and walking away, disappearing into the darkness. I dropped the blinds and stumbled back, my breathing shallow. My phone buzzed again, and I knew without looking that it was her. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't sleep the next night either. Even when days passed without another message or sighting, I couldn't shake the feeling that she was still watching, waiting. Because that's the thing about Jamie. She doesn't just leave. She lingers. Even now, weeks later, every time my phone buzzes, every time I hear the faintest knock at the door, I think it's her. And someday I know it will be.